to switch gears here and talk about the other WCC matchup, which is St. Mary's and Grand Canyon. This Grand Canyon team has won 29 games, and this team offensively, you look up and down this roster. This is a loaded group, and there's some really exciting players to kind of watch. And I know a lot of people. This is another one of those 5-12 matchups that everyone's kind of circling. In the few times you've gotten to see this squad, and I know like you saw them early on, what jumps out? What are some of the things about this Grand Canyon squad that really kind of stands out for you?
Yeah, just so everybody knows, I saw them up close in person as Zach mentioned. I did a couple games for CBS Sports Network in November, so let's keep that in perspective. I've not watched them live in person now in a number of months, but yeah, obviously dug into them when I was calling their games and came away super impressed. Unfortunately, for them, I actually called one of their losses, so I've gotten a lot of flack from their people. They lost the Arizona tip-off title game to South Carolina, and of course they're always shooting me messages on social media now. Hey man, what are you doing to us? But no, I mean Bryce Drew. For those who don't know, he's been there now 4 years. They've made 3 NCAA tournaments. He's done a remarkable job. They're 93-31. Like you put that in perspective. I mean, this is a program. This is not an overnight success story. I mean, these guys have been there and done it. The only thing they really have not accomplished is winning an NCAA tournament game. And I would say by far, this is the best team he has had. This is their best chance. Unfortunately for them, they're running into a St. Mary's team that you know me, man. I have all the respect in the world for Randy Bennett. I think it was an 8-6 start, right? I remember watching that loss to Missouri State, thinking to myself, what has happened to St. Mary's? And the switch flipped, and I'm like, I don't think anyone wants to face these guys come March Madness, and here we are, one of my favorite teams in the field in Grand Canyon's going up against them. So, yeah, I think when you look at them, the first thing you notice is, similar, we were talking about McNeese and how many weapons they have. They just, you go down the line and they have so many guys who can beat you. It really is it's like an all-star team assembled of guys who can, go off the dribble and score and do multiple things, and all conference guys. Ty Grant Foster is obviously the lead guy. He's, in my opinion, the best story in college basketball in a year that has had plenty of them. For those who don't know, you're talking about a guy who was not highly recruited out of high school, didn't have the grades, went to junior college. Bill Self scoops him up at Kansas after he becomes an All-American. He didn't get a lot of playing time there. He did play in an NCAA tournament with them. He transfers to DePaul. He plays one half of one game, collapses in the locker room at halftime, has to be rushed to the hospital. He ends up having 2 heart surgeries, couldn't play for 2 years basically. And Grand Canyon brings him on, taking a flyer on him. And he's become one of the most exciting players in the country and averaging nearly 20 points per game. And he's an electric scorer. He scores at multiple levels. He's the kind of guy that in March everybody wants to watch. He just can take over a game. But he also can have some tough nights shooting the ball. And I happen to, one of the games he played against South Carolina, I think he shot 5 for 17 or something like that from the floor. So he can be streaky. He can be streaky hot. He was really good in the WAC tournament. I got a lot of respect for him and his story and what he's come back from. It's really similar to, if you know, Keontae Johnson and what he did at Kansas State and the comeback story there. Actually, Scott Drew, there's a little connection there between Scott and Bryce and kind of all that goes. But yeah, he's the guy who heads it all. Ray Harrison has almost become, the fact that Ray Harrison's your number 2 guy is unbelievable because he was the WAC player of the year or WAC preseason player of the year and just completely took over the WAC tournament a year ago. And now he's a guy who they just steadies the ship. He's been around. He can score in so many ways, really good facilitator, incredibly crafty guard. I mean, it feels like forever ago that he was at Presbyterian in the Big South, and now he's playing in another NCAA tournament. So he's been there and done it. Gabe McLaughlin is, I think, as good a stretch forward there is in college basketball, honestly. I mean, he has so much he can do, a really, really good skill set, great defender, guy who can stretch the floor and shoot the 3, has gotten better and better every year. He was, I think, first team all-conference along with Tyon Grant Foster. So, that's a guy that's a major weapon. And then you start going down the line and, you think about Jovan Blackshear, who was the WAC preseason player of the year a season ago and has kind of become forgotten because he hurt his knee last year and he couldn't, he tore his ACL, couldn't play. Ray Harrison takes over, becomes, the best player in the WAC a year ago. And he now comes off the bench. And ever since he didn't play early on when I saw them in the Arizona tip-off, but he now is a huge asset off the bench. I mean, that's as good a bench guard as there is in college basketball with bringing him off the bench and what he can do for you as an explosive scorer and a playmaker. Luke Ward is starting to really come into his own. I remember watching him early on in the season. He started his career at Oregon. He was there for 4 years before coming over. So that's a guy who's been in a couple NCAA tournaments as well. And I remember watching him thinking, boy, this guy, if he can put it together offensively, and now if the WAC championship game, he knocked down a couple of threes. They were backbreaking for UT Arlington, a game that GCU won by 15. So, that's a guy who can give them so much. I think a guy like Duke Brennan does all the little things. Another guy who was at Arizona State, who's been at the Power 6 level, who has been in big games. And then, one other guy, too, I think that goes under the radar because he ultimately they don't need him to score all the time. They need him to do the little things, is Colin Moore, who was at Georgia State averaging 15 points a game last year. And now he is, being a really big impact guy off the bench for Bryce Drew. So, he's got a lot of weapons to go to. It's a deep bench. I got a lot of respect for this Grand Canyon team. I think they are one of the most fun teams in the field to watch for sure.
And I mean, looking at this also, like you've seen, I think it's almost kind of interesting because they get another matchup with a WCC team because they saw Gonzaga in the tournament a year ago. Right. And over the last couple of years, we've seen them play USF, LMU, Pepperdine, Gonzaga, Portland, now St. Mary's. It's like they're kind of getting the gauntlet of the WCC teams. And they've been one of the rumored teams out there of like, if the WCC were to expand, Grand Canyon would be on that short list of squads, and they've kind of gotten their fair share of WCC taste because they did beat Portland earlier in the year. They did see USF and beat them earlier in the year, as you kind of like pointed out. In that one, because that was a game again, like for the WCC people who know USF a little bit better. In that game, what was kind of like some of the things you that popped out? I'm looking at the box score to see like the 28 from Grant Foster to 24 from Harrison. Just like the way that team operates, because that was one where it felt like that because I think if I remember correctly, they had to come back in that one to win.
Yeah, they came back in that one. They came back against San Francisco in the Arizona tip-off. I saw them. That was I think, third game they played on the season. And so I sort of saw that as, okay, measuring stick game. Let's see where San Francisco's at. Let's see where GCU is at. San Francisco, frankly, should have won that game. I mean, they controlled that game for a lot of it. I mean, Marcus Williams just went off in the second half and couldn't miss. And down the stretch, it just became the Tyon Grant Foster show and Ray Harrison taking over. And the number one thing I saw early on in the season, Zach, and the number one thing I saw, you mentioned Portland, you mentioned what they've done all season long. They get to the free throw line at an absolutely absurd amount. I mean, it is unbelievable the way that they draw fouls. I think Tyon Grant Foster is among the best nationally in fouls drawn per 40 minutes on Ken Pom. Ray Harrison has been there historically in his career. They shot 50 free throws. They shot 50 free throws against UT Arlington in the WAC championship game. So if you're wondering, did the game take a while? Yeah, it took a while to finish. I don't know what time I ended up getting to bed after it finished, but that's the latest I've ever gotten to bed for a game that was regulation. Free throws just were getting shot every whistle. So in the NCAA tournament, are you going to get as many whistles? Maybe not, but they were 37 for 50 in the WAC championship. They took 30-plus free throws in the two games. I saw them in November. Grant Foster took 18 free throws in the WAC title game. Ray Harrison took 11. St. Mary's is usually pretty good at not fouling, but that is, I guarantee you, Randy Bennett, when he's talking to his team in practice this week, it's how do we guard without fouling? Because they're a team that can make tough shots, but if you can make them make tough shots and not let them stroll to the free throw line the way that they typically do, and they get there a whole lot, there's something to be said for teams who are just in attack mode constantly. If St. Mary's can guard without fouling, they're going to have a pretty good chance, because that's where Grand Canyon makes a lot of its hay as far as offensively and what they can do. And I think that the other question too is the pace, right? St. Mary's, we all know how deliberate they are and the way that they slow things down. And typically in NCAA tournament games, I'm not saying this is always the case, because, for instance, a Virginia UMBC, it happens where you get a game like that, and we know what Virginia, DeAndre Hunter didn't play and all that stuff, but it happens where a slow tempo team can't control the pace in a tournament game. But in a game like this, we have a team who wants to play pretty fast against a team who is on the slower side tempo-wise, who can establish that rhythm and tempo early on in the game. I think you're going to find out a lot in the first couple of minutes about how it's going to go. And Bryce Drew's team is certainly capable of playing a slow, methodical half-court game, but they want to get out and run if they can. And that's where they're at their best in high scoring and high flying, and obviously getting off threes in transition and that sort of thing. And using their athleticism, where I think they do have an athleticism advantage, I would think, on St. Mary's. But if St. Mary's can control the game in the half court and Mahaney and company can do their thing, Marshallonis and all these guys who really can score the ball with the best of them in the half court in a slower game, St. Mary's, I think, would have a pretty good chance.